Welcome to the session Introduction to Drupal 8. The purpose of the session is to give a bird's eye view of Drupal 8 and what has changed compared to Drupal 7 and versions before Drupal 7 even. So I'm not going to go into too much technical detail, but I will give you an overview in 30 minutes because we're getting hungry. Of course, I am. Let's start with a few statistics first. So Drupal 8 was released the 19th of November last year. It was a 5-year development cycle until from the start of the building on Drupal 8 until it was released 2015. It has under more than 200 new features and improvements compared to previous Drupal versions, and there were more than 3,000 contributors who worked on Drupal 8 in total. So that's a massive amount of people actually contributed to Drupal 8. It's much higher than it was for Drupal 7. So quick timeline. Drupal was released in 2001 originally by Dries Buitaert. Most of you will know probably. It's Belgian. It originates in Belgium. And then you see the releases until Drupal 7, and then Drupal 8 is actually released in 2015. You'll also notice that this is the longest cycle ever for a Drupal version to get released. So from 2011 till 2015. Mainly because the whole system has been rewritten. It's fully object-oriented at this moment, so it's much more stable, much more expandable, much more up to the industry standards. So everything has been rewritten, new templating engine, like we will see in a few minutes. So it took some time to get it stable and to get every blocker issue out of there. So let's take a look at what has changed for the web authors, the actual end users of the content management system. Those are the people who enter the content in the system and to manage menus, etc. So first of all, there is an improved backend system. There is a new backend theme, as you can see here, with a few optimizations compared to Drupal 7. It kind of feels like familiar, but there are some details that are quite important. It's mobile friendly to begin with, so you can run this backend on your tablet if you want to, and even on your smartphone. And there are a few optimizations here. So the toolbar at the top is now more flexible. You can expand it and you can choose whether to render it on the top or even render it on the left sidebar. So the menus that fold out of that toolbar. It has CK editor now built into core, so rich text editing can now happen without any contributed modules to install. It's nicely integrated, so when managing pages, a CK editor is there and is pretty well pre-configured. There's also all the metadata when you're editing a page is now in a separate region on the right-hand side, so you do not have to scroll straight to the bottom to see all the things related to menu placement of the page or taxonomies you might want to assign to a page or other metadata. So those are now all rendered on the right hand side. It's much easier to get to. And it has some new intuitive publishing options. The save button is replaced by, as you can see, save and keep published button, or you can save it and unpublish, and when you're starting a new page you can save and keep it unpublished for a while. So it's much clearer what you're doing. It's not just saying save, it actually indicates what will happen if you click that button. Few small things happened there, but quite important. I'm not going to list every new feature, of course, in 30 minutes, but one of the things that we find is very it's not really much attention has been paid to this is the content preview function in Drupal 8, which is now actually working compared to Drupal 7, where you actually had your preview of your content. There was the button preview, but it rendered the preview in the back end. And that's not always what you want, of course. You want to preview it in the front end, actually, what the visitor is actually will see when they access that page. It works like this. So you have that preview button right there, next to the publish button. And when you click it, you actually go to the front end and you will see your changes you made to the page, or the page like you created it if it's a new page. You can see it in the front end theme. And this is what the visitors will see. So you can perfectly preview it, and then you can go back to the back end there's an extra bar at the top now. As you can see, a blue bar, and there's a button, you go back to the backend. It also works on mobile, so you can also preview on mobile by making your browser screen a bit smaller. For example, you can also see what it will look like on a mobile device. All the media queries and all the layouts are correct in this mode, so you can preview before you can publish. It's optional, you do not have to preview. And you can also activate different templates for your preview. There is a view mode drop-down menu, and you can choose whether to view a preview of that full page, or you can switch to, for example, a teaser version of that page. So when that page or that event or something is listed in a view or in your search results, you can switch to that view mode and see immediately what it will look like in the search results, and not only as a standalone page. Also, all provided from core. Next up is inline editing. Inline editing actually allows you to edit a page straight from the front end without ever going to the back end. So instead of always switching to back end, change a few things, save and preview, go back to the front end, this goes a step further. It actually allows you to activate this in from the front end, and you can start fiddling around with the text using the rich text editor. You can make things bold, create links, and then when you're done, you just click save, and the changes are immediately saved. So it allows for much faster content editing work. Still a bit buggy, as you might have noticed if you try Drupal 8. It still needs some work, but I think most bugs will be resolved over the course of time. Let's hope that. It also respects permissions, of course. If you're not allowed to edit that page, you cannot activate the inline editing mode, obviously. Integrated training. When delivering projects to clients, we often deliver a manual for the end users, the authors, for how to use the CMS, how to create specific pages, how to put something in a menu, how to tag a page with a certain in a certain taxonomy, for example. But that you have to create a separate manual for that. And now in Drupal 8 you can actually have you can have the different steps, what it takes to perform a task right in the interface in the backend. So for example, this is the views interface. Some of you might have seen it. It's a quite complex user interface. And you can actually see that there's a tour button on the top. It's the tour module. And it actually allows you to have a step through the interface. This is built in, for example, for views in core, but you can also extend it for your own modules. So if you build a module with a rather complex user interface, you can just implement the tour API, and then you can have your instructions pop up in the backend straight for your end users. So that's quite, it's more handy than delivering a separate manual for these users. So it steps through the different possibilities in the interface. A lot of other things are also improved, which I'm not going to go any deeper into. But yeah, views is now built in. We do not have to wait until the views module is available for Drupal 8. It is now in Drupal 8. You can have bulk file uploads, drag and drop from your desktop. You have better support for linking. Multilingual support is now also built in, which is quite important because it's much better supported and it's much less buggy. And you do not have to combine 10 modules to get a decent multilingual website. It's now all these things are built in. And also improved block management. You can now, for example, create block types like you can create content types. So you can have block types for your clients, and then they can create blocks straight in that system. Much more convenient than having nodes and using a separate module to render these nodes in a block. There are also things that are changed for the visitors actually of your website. There is improved accessibility. All Drupal 8 templates are now HTML5 and fully responsive. All Twig templates are that way, and it's much better for the accessibility of a page, of course. Next to that, there's also the REI attributes and schema.org markup in the HTML, which is sent to the browser. That means the HTML is actually enriched with few tags that actually attributes that actually give some more details about the content, which machines can read, like search engines, for example. And lights are on. It actually allows search engines to better understand what the page is about, what the content is about. And it also helps, for example, for screen readers or for people who are blind, for example, for the machines they're using, braille keyboards, etc., to understand what is on that page. Disco. Also, websites will load faster when using Drupal 8. There are actually three main regions in which performance, which have an impact on the performance actually. So, just a simplification, but you have the server time, the time it takes the server to create a page and send it to the client browser. You have the time it takes to transmit the page over the wire, over the internet. And then you have the browser time. That's the time it takes for the browser to render the page. And actually Drupal has several improvements in those three areas. So for example, simple example. On the left hand side you have a laptop with a broadband connection. Right hand side you have a smartphone with a 3G connection. There is a page which has been requested. This is the same page. So on the laptop machine, it actually takes about 150 milliseconds to fully get that page rendered and start reading it. It's about 860 kilobytes in size. If you have that same page and you request it on a slower connection, actually it will just take longer. This is without Drupal 8. So 10 times slower actually, 1500 milliseconds is the same size. And with Drupal 8 it actually is much faster, the page. Like 68%, just for example. And it actually, as you can see, the page is much not that large in size anymore. It's 296 kilobytes instead of 860. And the magic actually here is that image on that page is not the same actual file which is sent to the smartphone. It actually, Drupal takes into account the size of the screen of the smartphone and the desktop also, but it takes into account the size of the screen and sends the image appropriately for that screen size. So the image is much smaller which is sent to the smartphone. It's called responsive images. It's a standard in HTML5 and it actually is built into Drupal. So Drupal recognizes the screen size and then it renders or creates the correct thumbnail or smaller version of that image and sends it to the browser. So in the end the page will be much faster. Still not as fast as on the desktop, of course. To summarize actually what Drupal 8 does for performance in general is, like Wim just discussed, you have the caching API, you have BigPipe, there's the new Twig templates which are much faster in rendering than PHP template in Drupal 7. You have these responsive images indeed, CSS, JavaScript aggregation is on by default. It's quite an improvement compared to Drupal 7 where it could be hard to get a good performance out of your site. Alright, some few technical changes. It's now much more easier to deploy new versions of the website, of the code base, to your staging server, production server, acceptance, etc. When you're working in a team, some of you might know, it is important that you can integrate your code at certain moments in time. When changes are made, you need to be able to roll them back easily. You need to be able to test them on different machines, on different environments. Maybe you want a configuration for every environment separately, so acceptance has not the same Google API ID or Google Analytics key than compared to production. And there's probably a release schedule. And what Drupal 8 actually includes is it's a new way of managing your configuration. So next to your code, your custom modules for example, you also have pieces of configuration like your content types, taxonomies, those kinds of things. Those are configuration and traditionally they were stored in the database previous to Drupal 8. And there was no easy way to get those things into code and deploy it through your Git or Subversion versioning system. So in Drupal 8 is actually now built in that you can have all your configuration in files which you can commit to your version control system and then deploy. There's also a system in place to export that configuration out of your local installation and then import it on production, for example. It uses the YML standard for its files. And those files are readable, so you can dig into it and you can see what the configuration is. So you're actually, it's not really needed anymore to use features or strongarm or that kind of modules, which were really needed in Drupal 7 and Drupal 6, for example, to be able to export and deploy the configuration without copying databases, etc. So that's quite a big improvement. There are, however, use cases for features, but it's not necessary anymore. You can use features in Drupal 8, but mostly to package configuration and to install it on various different websites. So if you have a multi-site with 5 websites in, you can use features to bundle certain configurations like content types and taxonomies and deploy them to several sites at once. That's a use case for features, still in Drupal 8. Drupal 8 is now also more suitable for a wider audience because it's using more industry standards. You have to know that before Drupal 8, all the code which was in Drupal core, except for one library, jQuery, it was all written by the Drupal community by themselves. So a lot of problems with that. The Drupal community has to provide all the documentation for that code. It has to be tested by the Drupal community all by themselves. And it's a good thing that Drupal 8 adopts more industry standard components like, for example, Symfony. It's fully object-oriented, so it's much more friendly to developers. Backbone.js, for example, and it really decreases the need of specific Drupal knowledge to get into Drupal development. It's also better for maintainability, etc. So it really is looking into the industry, like Symfony is a very well tested and very well known framework which is very good documentation. So it's a big plus there. Other thing is that web services are now built into core. So by default, out of the box, I have a small demo in a minute, you will see what you can do. You can actually get data out of Drupal without installing any contributed modules. So you can have a web service which feeds different apps, for example, or you can make your system talk to certain things like a Twitter feed or etc. So all out of the box, you can grab data out of Drupal programmatically actually, and can also put data into Drupal from another system. So that's all the headless Drupal things you're hearing about maybe. You can have a separate layer of front end on top of your Drupal which communicates using these web services. Quick example, so the circle is actually the layer of web services, and you have the different connections. In this case, Google Tag Manager, Twitter, HubSpot, Salesforce can use that web services to get data out of Drupal and put data into Drupal. And there are specific connectors available, of course, which does the actual integration. But the main, the fundamental web service component is inside core. You can also use it to, for example, not only your website you can feed with content from Drupal, but also things like an app on a watch. You can also have the information from Drupal displayed on that watch. And indeed, if you're not running an actual website from your Drupal installation, this is actually an headless Drupal, which has no actual HTML front end, but only, for example, an app. So you can use Drupal actually to manage all content which needs to be displayed on your app. So it doesn't need to have a web front end. Other things which are new, the Twig templating engine like we talked about. You now have also universally unique identifiers for all entities in Drupal, which makes it much more easier to do content staging, for example. It's not provided in core, content staging itself, but I guess there will be contributed modules which will do that. Previously you had to have separate modules to have the unique identifiers. It means that actually content on your local machine has the same unique identifier than that piece of content on the production, and you can actually push content to production and change that from a staging environment to production. So you can actually have a separate environment to preview all things before putting them live at once. So if you have 5 pages, a whole section of your website, with menus, etc., you can actually configure that and push that to production. It's not in core, but there are modules who do that, and they're based on these UUIDs. There's also migration support built in, so if you want to migrate from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, or even from Drupal 6 to Drupal 8, there is support in core to do that. Quick demo. I made a small clone of our website in Drupal. And I have an events page here. And as you can see, I have a list of all events. The most recent event is at the top. And then there's all past events. Let's say we also have an Apple Watch app, which visitors can use to view recent events, etc. I have this right here. It's kind of big. Big watch. And it's actually the list I have on the website. As you can see, Drupal 8 is on top. Just a second. Yeah. I can scroll to this list. It's a real list. I can go to my springboard, or how's it called on the watch. This is my app. It's written in Swift. It's quite a few hours of work. You can write this app in Swift, and it actually talks to Drupal using this built-in web services. And it uses JSON as a format to do that. I have set up on this is actually a view. What you're seeing here, Drupal view, using the views module, which is in core. And it's not that view does not only has a page, an HTML page related to it, but also has a JSON feed assigned created for it. So next to the page for that view, there's also a way to get the data not in HTML list, but in a JSON list. This is the representation of my events in a JSON format, which is readable by Swift on the Apple Watch. It looks like this, so I can go to Manage here, Structure, and there are all my views. There is the Events view, and you can see indeed I have the REST export right here. And I can change the order of this list separately from my view on the website, so I can have the watch have a different order than on the website, or other things. So let's get back and let's add a new event. So I can create an event, have a title, Drupal camp, it's today. Can upload an image. Oh, weird. Bug? Not sure. Yeah. Small text. Okay, right here you can see the publishing options on the right-hand side, so I can set, for example, what the URL, friendly URL will be, etc., without scrolling to the bottom. Forgot my alt text. Yeah, this is the validation. It's quite strong. Okay, so as you can see right now, I have my Drupal Camp 2016 event on the top. If we go to the watch, this is watchOS 2, and you still have to relaunch your app for it to get the new data. So you can see on watchOS 3 it happens automatically, and it fetches all the data continuously in the background. So I relaunched the app, and now it's actually doing a request to the Drupal website, fetches the list again, and then pulls in the new list and renders it. I have just created this list. You cannot click on it, but imagine you can click on it and see all the details. And it's a new request to Drupal to get all the details, to get the image. We get the picture. So this has been built without any custom development or without installing any contributed modules. On the Apple Watch hand side, it's of course a couple of hours of work. So quickly back to the presentation. Okay. The impact what Drupal 8 has on your existing Drupal installations. What happens with your existing Drupal websites, and can I start new website actually on Drupal 8, or do I have to wait still a bit? Let's see. So let's say you have a Drupal 6 website still. It's bad news now because support has been officially dropped since February, the end of February, so there's no more community supported support for Drupal 6. So that means if there are any bugs or security problems found at this moment, you will not be covered. We are now September. If you take a look at what happens if you have a Drupal 7 website running, it will, at this point, what the documentation says, it will be supported at least 3 months after Drupal 9 will be released. There are a lot of discussions to make it last a bit longer. It depends how many Drupal sites are still running on Drupal 7 by that point in time. But that is actually the case. This is actually the information we have right now. So what to do? If you have a Drupal 6 website, you have to start thinking about replacing it by a Drupal 7 or a Drupal 8 website. In general, we recommend to start right away on Drupal 8. It's very stable now. Most of the contributed modules are there, so you can start a new website in Drupal 8 unless you have specific needs for specific modules which are not ported yet to Drupal 8. You can also rely on non-community support, which is mostly paid support. There are some companies which are offering this. It's quite expensive, but there are ways out if you still want support for Drupal 6, but it's generally not recommended. If you have Drupal 7, you have still some time, a couple of years, to start thinking about updating, but it's probably not necessary to just, for the sake of updating, it's more likely that you will have a product upgrade when you do a rebuild of your website. Most probably by 2019 your website will be outdated concerning design or information architecture. There's new things you need, so when you do a rebuild of your website, it's best that you use Drupal 8, of course. But there's not necessary to go from 7 to 8 just for the sake. Some best practices concerning these upgrades. It's best to at all time reduce custom development because all your custom code needs to be changed when you're doing major updates between Drupal versions. So when you're going from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, you have to rebuild your modules to comply with the new APIs. And it's also best to use standard Drupal content structures and if not necessary, you should not introduce custom entities, etc., because it's much harder to migrate to these new versions because the migration scripts support the standard ways of storing content in Drupal, like node, taxonomy, menu, views, paragraphs. All these modules or all these ways of storing content, those are supported by things like migrate. So it's much easier to migrate between Drupal versions. So what's next? There is a new release schedule for Drupal 8. Since Drupal 8, and actually it's using semantic versioning. You can Google that. It actually means that you have major, minor and patch releases, and the main point is that there are minor releases which actually introduce new functionality into Drupal 8 without breaking backwards compatibility. That's quite important. There was one such a minor release, 8.1 on 20th of April, and there will be a new one, 8.2 October 5th, and then 8.3 April 5th. If you calculate, it's every 6 months, more or less. And those releases will actually incorporate new functionalities. Like, for example, in Drupal 8.2, there will be an experimental module called Outside In, which you might have read about. And it actually makes it possible to change, for example, menus and the contents of blocks without going to the backend. So much more of that concept of inline editing, actually. Those are actually fully backwards compatible, so you can install 8.1, 8.2, 8.3 without much worrying about what will happen with your website. Normally it will stay running, but it's best to test, of course, like with every update. So it ensures that we have much better product momentum now with Drupal 8. When Drupal 7 was released, for example, we had 5 years without any new features, only bug fixes and security fixes. That's not much excited, of course, if you're trying to sell Drupal, doing pre-sales, and there is still the product from 5 years ago in the end. That's not really sexy stuff. 8, like you will see, will have much improvements, functionalities, new things in these minor releases every 6 months, actually. So a few takeaways. It's much more efficient for marketers to work with, end users, authors. It's a dream for developers, you can say. Because it's much more object-oriented and all these things. And it's also this platform for these future evolutions. Inside Drupal 8 there will be a lot of things added in the near future. One thing to say about these usability for marketers, it's still not perfect, of course. If you look at the inline editing example I gave, it's not the best experience when pages get very long and you're still working with a rich text editor. And you're still giving authors the responsibility of layout for most part. They can choose to insert an image, and they can choose to position it to the right. They can make it bigger and smaller, so pages will not look that consistent. And maybe there is not much care going into the size of the images, and pages will load not that fast. So still a lot of issues with that approach. And we think that there is a better approach, or a different approach, not better in all cases, but a different approach which can solve these issues for very complex pages or longer pages. And we have a session about that in the afternoon at 4:20 in this room about Geyser. And it's actually something we're working on to highly increase the author experience for actual non-technical users of Drupal, webmasters, marketers, no technical experience, to actually make these people, allow these people to quickly edit pages and create complex pages without much hassle, without the problems you have with the rich text editor. So if you're interested in that, please join that session in the afternoon. Okay? So, who likes Petanque? Because Amplexor is giving away some Petanque sets if you want at our booth or at our banner, because we're not actually having a table this year, but we have a banner up and you can leave your Twitter handle there and you can join the contest. We pull out some papers in the end of the day, and you can have a set of Petanque balls if you want to enjoy at the office, maybe during breaks or on the floor inside the office. We have them at the booth at the coffee machine, so if you're interested, please leave your Twitter handle and we will let you know if you've won a set of Jeux de Boules. So that was my session. Quick introduction, bird's eye view of Drupal 8. If you have any questions, I will gladly answer them. No questions? All right. Then I hope to see you this afternoon maybe for other session. Thank you.